Good morning, everybody. It is I, your favorite English teacher, Prof. Ka. And I have a special guest in front of me today. I have Spencer, actually, a gringo that I stumbled upon just by chance. Actually, I'll give a quick rundown for Spencer, anybody watching this. I was on Twitter because I know gringo men, we like to get our information from Twitter. I'm not too sure about Spencer, but lots of gringo men, we prefer to get our information from Twitter. And there was some Colombian guy shared a video of Spencer giving translations of Colombian vocabulary. So I went to his TikTok. He had a whole bunch of videos. It's early in the morning, everybody. I'm still having a hard time thinking. But yeah, giving a whole bunch of translations of Latin American vocabulary. Actually, I think it's for Latinos, but for whatever reason, this guy on Twitter was sharing it to the gringos, like, hey, this is Colombian vocabulary. So Spencer seemed like a cool guy. My vocabulary is horrible right now. Cool guy, an interesting guy. I talked to him a little bit. Seems like he's got lots of tales, stories about being in Latin America and about learning languages. So he's here today to talk to us about that. So Spencer, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So Spencer, I guess just to start off, I don't really know that much about you either. So give us a quick rundown about who you are and what you do more or less on social media.
Yeah. Hello everybody. I'm Spencer. So I have two different accounts that I have. I have an account where I teach. It could really work either way, but I teach Spanish speakers English on Spencer Canose, and then I have Spencer Sabe, which is an account where I teach Portuguese speakers English as well, which I've actually had for a longer time. So I have extensive experience traveling and living in Latin America, also in Spain and Portugal. I moved around a lot growing up because of my dad's job. So that really got me interested in traveling and learning languages. When I was younger, we lived in Germany. I think that was like the first, uh, like a catalyst for me wanting to learn languages. I really liked that experience. And then in high school, I took Spanish, like a lot of people do in the United States. I don't know if Canada, you guys maybe do French. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's changing now. I lived in Calgary for 1 year in 2018, and I talked to an elementary school teacher during a Cuban salsa lessons, and she was saying how the most popular language to learn, second language now in Calgary at least, which is a big city, but it's not like one of the big three cities in Canada, is
Uh-huh.
now Spanish. And I think Chinese might be the second. So actually, French is getting less and less popular. But I
Is it
guess
not
for
mandatory?
well, this is actually interesting. Well, wasn't planning on talking about this right away, but who knows? We'll talk about it now because even Spencer is a bit surprised by this. So yeah, in Canada, we've got two official languages. We got English and French, and yeah, just like Spencer, most Latinos I talk to, they think that all Canadians speak French, but it depends. I think in Ontario, it could be more mandatory because they're really close to Quebec, and they're the two provinces with the most history between each other. But for example, I'm from Alberta, and Alberta is kind of like the Texas of Canada. We're the most Americanized province, and we really don't like the French that much. I guess maybe a little bit kind of like Americans don't have a lot of good things to say about the French because of their attitude, very similar in Alberta. Also because of the Canadian history. So, for example, when I was in high school, I never learned any French. I took one class of French, and it was horrible. And maybe one of the reasons why I didn't start learning languages when I was younger was because the French class was so boring, and the teacher, who knows, maybe it's offensive for some people, but she looked like a witch and she seemed evil in the classes as well. Just like, okay, children, now you will make maps of French words and sit on the floor gluing French words onto paper. And it just seemed so useless. I thought, if this is how you learn languages, it seems like one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of. But yeah, so I guess nowadays, from what I know, in Canada, Chinese and French are, I know, sorry, Chinese and Spanish are probably the two most popular second languages. And yeah,
Oh,
lots of
interesting.
Canadians, just like Americans, I think, go to Mexico or Dominican Republic. Well,
Yeah.
Canadians, we can go to Cuba. So we go to Cuba, Mexico, Dominican Republic for vacation. So I think that's another reason that we're learning Spanish. Yeah, because there's
Oh,
not as many
gotcha.
Latinos in Canada as the United States. But for vacation, of course, we go to Latin America, just like our brothers in the South. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's so funny because going to Canada as an American, everything's always in English and French.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
it's like
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you go to the grocery store, for anybody who's never been to
Yeah.
Canada, yeah, everything will be in English and French. But yeah, so as a Canadian, I'll tell you right now, I look at it and I don't really understand anything. Actually, I took French in university, so now I understand a lot of it. But before
Oh,
that, I
gotcha.
would just I don't know what the heck they're talking about in this other language. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a lot.
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Okay, so the more
I thought
you
that it was mandatory for some reason. Like as a bilingual country,
No.
I thought it was, but
I'm
make
pretty sure there's lots of Frenchies in Quebec who would like to make it mandatory, but no, especially my province, very rebellious. We're just no, I'm not gonna learn that dirty.
you're in Calgary, you said?
No, I'm from well, it's gonna turn to an interview more for me, Spencer. Jeez. All right, yeah,
Sorry.
but I'm from a small town in. Well, I'm not even from a town. When I talk to Latinos, they ask me where are you from. I always say Canada. First thing they'll usually say is, "Oh, are you from Toronto?" Because Latinos like Toronto for whatever reason, and I'll say, "No, I'm not from Toronto. Where are you from?" Alberta, and then that's usually when they start getting confused. Like, Alberta, is that by Toronto? And I was like, nah, it's far away. So yeah, my province is Alberta. The closest city to where I grew up is Edmonton, and the closest town to where I grew up is, I'm not even gonna say it because it's really small. And also, yeah, I don't want any crazy people looking for me, even though I feel pretty safe because it's too cold, too far away for anybody to find. So far, only 2 Latinos have ever visited me on my farm. So yeah, it's not gonna happen. But yeah, the closest town to me is 15 minutes away. So I'm from very middle of nowhere, more or less.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Interesting.
Canada. Yeah. But I lived in Calgary. I lived in Vancouver. I spent some time in a suburb close to Edmonton. So I've been to a few cities in Canada, but yeah, I'm from the countryside. I'm a country boy.
Yeah,
Spencer
you're a
knows what
country
that
boy.
means. Yeah, exactly.
You're a country boy. All right,
Well,
that's awesome.
let's talk about you now, Spencer. Stop
No,
turning
yeah.
the tables on me, okay?
Sorry, just for everybody watching, we're just kind of meeting now, so I'm also interested in your story.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm probably gonna ask some questions as well, but that's good because that'll be like a natural dialogue, like how
Yeah,
we
exactly.
actually
Yeah, this
converse.
is exactly how gringos would speak, all right?
Exactly.
Well, let's go back to you now, Spencer. Well, where are you from? You're from Minnesota, right?
Yeah, so I'm from Minnesota. But because I moved around a lot growing up, I kind of lived all over, not just in Minnesota. And then I went to high school in Florida, for example, but I kind of claimed Minnesota. And then I went to college in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And that's where my family's from, my mom, my dad, all my aunts and uncles and cousins and all that. And so then I went to school here. And then I actually in college I majored in Spanish and international relations, political science. So
actually, it's the same as me. Yeah, same.
yeah, we got the same background then there. So
yeah.
I mean, I really got interested in Spanish. I think really, honestly, it's interesting because I took Spanish in middle school. But it was the same thing like you said. It was kind of that class. It's like, oh, really? We have to do Spanish class. And then I went to my cousin's quinceañera.
Oh, really?
Because like her dad is my mom's brother, so they're white, right?
Okay, yeah.
But then, or like I guess they're not Hispanic, but like her mom is my aunt, but married into the family. She's Mexican.
Okay.
And so like my cousins are half Mexican, half American. Okay. And so I went to her quinceañera, and I remember I went to it, and I was like so like I just kind of like fell in love with like the whole experience. Like it was so awesome because she had all of her Mexican cousins there as well, and that whole Mexican side of the family. They're all speaking Spanish. There's all this food, dancing, music, all this stuff, and I really just fell in love with right away with like Spanish, the language itself, culture, the food, and I was like, I want to know what you guys are saying to each other, what's going on, and that was kind of the start of like when I actually could see language in its outside of a classroom and see what it could do to people, like how it connects people and what it creates. I think that was the catalyst for me really falling in love with that. And then once I found that passion, that's all I needed to motivate me to study. And that motivated me through the rest of high school, and then into college. And yeah, and then in college, I studied in Spain. I studied abroad in Spain in college for 9 months. So as a junior, I went to Spain, Sevilla in the south. Okay. And that was like obviously an awesome experience.
Oh, I got a whole bunch of questions for you. But I'm just curious about Spain because I've never been to Spain. I always kind of want to go just because it's well, I think for Latinos, they don't like it when I say it. I don't know another way to say it. Maybe you can tell me, but I guess like it's the motherland of the Latin American cultures. But I think Sevilla has like more of the, I guess, Latino Spanish. It doesn't have that such a strong Spanish accent as like Madrid, or if you go to Barcelona or more northern Spain. Or do they speak quite differently than most Latinos?
They do. In the south, it's called Andalucia. And
Yeah.
so that whole province is Andalucia. So you have Sevilla, which is probably, I think, maybe the biggest city.
Yeah.
And they speak a lot faster.
Okay.
They speak a lot faster, and they still Thefeo, which is
do?
like
Okay,
corazón.
okay.
They still do that. They do.
Okay.
There's a few people that or it's like, sorry, it's not Thefeo. Thefeo is when it's like always that sound. It's like when they do it like the rest of the Spaniards do.
Okay.
Only the Canary Islands is really the only place where they actually seseo, which is technically a different province, but they also speak pretty fast. So that Spanish is very similar in a way to like the Spanish in Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, some of the Caribbean areas of like Venezuela, Colombia, because they speak really fast. They cut off their S's. It's still so, but I wouldn't say it's like Peruvian Spanish or Chilean or Argentinian or Mexican. It's more like that Cuban, Dominican, Caribbean Spanish, but it still definitely sounds very Spanish, just because they do say like corazón and zapatos and stuff like that.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go back to that quinceañera, because I think it sounds like your story is extremely similar to mine. So you studied political science, you studied Spanish in university, and I think you discovered Mexican culture a bit sooner than me, but very similar to you. When I went to university, I met my first Mexican, and he took me to have tacos. And I'm Canadian, so it's not, maybe United States there's a lot more, but in Canada there's not really any taquerias. So he took me with a Mexican friend of his, which ended up becoming my girlfriend, to a taqueria for the first time. So I had tacos de lengua, tacos carne asada, tacos pollo con mole, and I also tried agua de horchata and agua de Jamaica. And yeah, very similar to you, just that experience of eating that food. And I think, again, similar to you, where you saw how the language like made them so happy. And for me, just seeing them talking to each other in Spanish, then eating the food that they love so much. And yeah, just like you said, it motivated me to learn Spanish, because it just seemed so beautiful, just how happy they were, and the food was so delicious. And I
gosh, yeah.
Okay, if there's more of this food in another country in the world, then I got to learn this language. And of course, the girl ended up becoming my girlfriend. So I was like, well, I also should learn more Spanish for her as well. But yeah, very similar. So I guess going back to that quinceañera, was there something in particular about the quinceañera that really struck you, that really gave you that passion for the, I guess, Latin American cultures or Spanish?
So I think it was like a bunch of things happening in my life at the time. So like when I was there at I remember it was in the summer, it was during the summertime, and we were outside in her backyard. And I think it was, the food and like sorry, I hit my computer there. It's like the food and just that energy, of like people coming up, and everyone was so happy to see each other. And you know how like Mexican culture, they're just very, I'd probably say most Latino cultures, just they're close, they're family oriented, lots of good food, lots of music. And I always liked that, and that's when I started listening to Spanish music, like reggaeton and all that stuff. And so I think it was just similar to you, like really good food and the music. And I just liked the way Spanish sounded too. I thought it was a pretty language when everyone was talking to each other, and the laughter. It just was a overall really good experience. And then it's interesting because then based on that, I went back to high school in the fall. I like got a book at the library. I started studying. And then in the fall, we actually had there was a Mexican family that immigrated to our town. And we actually didn't have a lot of Hispanics in my high school at all, because I know there's parts of the States that have like a lot of Hispanics, and there's parts that don't. Where I was at, we didn't. And so we actually had a student come. Her name was Elvira, and she didn't speak any English. And the principal like assigned me to be her advisor, or not her advisor, but let's kind of help her like figure out the ropes, at school. And it was so awesome because I saw like how my ability to speak Spanish could really help somebody, which I thought was so cool. Like I helped her with everything. all throughout the day. We talked all the time. I was the only one that could talk to her, so that was really cool as well.
Mhm. Okay.
Sorry, I have my dog here. He keeps on running around. I'm
Yeah.
gonna see if I, no, but no. So that I think that was probably the best experience for
Uh-huh.
me at least.
So what age were you then when you started learning Spanish? Was it 16, 17?
Yeah, I was. Oh, I must have been. Honestly, I think 14 or 15
14?
because it was
Yeah.
maybe it was more eighth grade freshman year.
Okay.
So yeah, I would think I would have been like 14, 15.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know, did in your school do you become like the Spanish guy? Because I wasn't the Spanish guy in high school. When I was in high school, I was the Swedish guy because I was learning Swedish. So,
Oh,
but all my
nice.
friends, well, they made fun of me in a friendly way. But yeah, I became known as, oh, Kyle, he's the Swedish one. But I don't know, in your high school, did they like, oh, that's Spencer, he's the one who knows Spanish.
I think so. Because yeah, I was really close with like the Spanish teachers and
Hmm.
like I just really, really enjoyed Spanish class, you know.
Hmm.
So but like I said, there wasn't a lot of Hispanics in my high school. So I didn't have like there wasn't like a group of Hispanics or you know
Hmm.
how that sort of thing. There really
Yeah,
wasn't. So
yeah,
I guess like maybe I
yeah.
guess.
So yeah, in those
Yeah.
first few years, were you just learning Spanish from basically the music and maybe a few books that you found in the library?
Yeah, so I had Elvira, so I talked to her all the time in high school.
Yeah,
And then yeah, I love reading. I love self-study. Like
yeah.
I don't know, I've always learned I speak a few different languages and that's how I've always
Hmm.
started off is I go to Barnes and Noble or just the bookstore, the
Hmm.
library, and yeah, I just get a book. I like a good grammar book, a vocab book, and I would just read and study and kind of put that stuff together. And then also I did listen to a lot of Spanish music. And then when I went to college, like so I did have I spoke Spanish probably decently well.
Hmm.
And then when I went to college, I placed into a higher level of Spanish.
Okay.
And then I actually my first year that I was in college, I did like a mission trip where I went to Ecuador. And that
Okay.
was my first time not going abroad, but going to a Spanish speaking country when I was
Hmm.
18. And
Okay.
I did a mission trip there. And it was awesome. Like, and it was
Hmm.
the first time that I saw like, you know, using Spanish like in a country where they speak Spanish and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So
All right. Well, which part is somebody from Ecuador watching this? Which part of Ecuador, just so that was it like Quito,
yeah,
Guayaquil?
I went to Quito.
Yeah. Okay. And
Yeah.
so, and was that the first time you ever been in Latin America? Was Quito, or had you been to other places before that?
That was the first time. We had never even gone on like a family vacation to Mexico or any of that. So yeah, the first time I went to south of the border was freshman year when I went to Quito for this. It was a class technically, but we were there kind of helping like build houses in some of
Okay.
the different areas of the city.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious 'cause you said mission. Now, yeah, you're curious about some of my details. I'm curious about some of your details. When I hear mission, I think like the Mormons. So was it like a religious mission, or was
Yeah.
it like something with university?
So no, not Mormon
Okay.
because no, because I went to a Catholic. It's fairly common. I don't know about in Canada. In the States, we have a lot
Okay.
of big Catholic schools like Notre Dame
Yeah.
or things like
Yeah,
that.
we
And
got some
so,
Catholic schools, but yeah, I
okay.
went to a public school, so yeah, I don't really know that much. The Catholic schools are always kind of a mystery to me. Like, oh, what are they doing in those Catholic
So a lot of
schools?
times the core curriculum
Mhm.
for a lot of these Catholic schools is you have to take like theology, right? So you have to take 3 years
Okay.
of theology, 2 years of philosophy. Like that's just
Okay.
part of the core curriculum to graduate. And
Hmm.
my school was that way as well.
Oh, okay.
And so this class, if I'm not mistaken, it's been so long, but I
Yeah.
think it was a class that accomplished one of those requirements, right?
Okay.
So we went and during we stayed in this at this house that helped people like impoverished people in the
Okay.
community. Like basically like they had like it was I don't want to say like a homeless shelter because it was like a community center for families that
Okay.
needed and the only requirement to go to this center was to if you had to have a kid that worked,
Hmm.
which is kind of crazy. But like
Okay.
these, all their kids, particularly their sons, worked shining shoes.
Okay. But
That's
like,
how this started
yeah, so
off.
kids, like young kids, basically like 10 years old, something like that, 12 years
Exactly,
old. Okay.
exactly. And so then if your kid did that, then you were eligible to go to the center
Hmm.
that had yeah, that basically had like activities, and they had school, and they had like food. And so it was this big center for all these families. And so that's where we worked out of. So we worked kind of volunteering in those classrooms and teaching English to these
Okay.
kids. So that was my first experience teaching English
Okay.
as well, was in Ecuador. And then
Okay.
kind of extracurricular activities we did. We like obviously went around Ecuador, went to Los Baños, which is like a kind
I
of
think.
a, if anyone from Ecuador knows that, it's like a
Okay.
resorty town,
Okay. Yeah.
more
Yeah.
like
I might have heard
tropical-ish,
it.
I guess.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
It has like that. I think the
But
famous
it's on the
swing.
coast. Oh
Nope.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I know. Okay, I know what you're talking about with the swing. Yeah. So more in the mountains, like beautiful
Yes.
views.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So there.
Okay. All right. So and that was in university, right?
That was my first year in college. Yeah.
College. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I get maybe just something for everybody watching this. So I'm Canadian. Spencer's American. I always tell my students. So with Americans, I would say Canadian English, American English is very similar.
Very
But one of
similar.
the peculiar differences is Canadians. We always say university. We can say college, but it's not as common. And then obviously Spencer, he's from the United States, so they always use college for
Yeah, we do.
university. So it's like I said university, Spencer's like, yeah, college. So just so you guys know, we're talking about the same thing. He just uses college. I use university.
Yeah.
All right. Uh, and you said in university you studied Spanish as well, right? So basically, from the first year of university, that was one of your minors was Spanish.
Majors, actually. Yeah.
Actually, okay.
Because I double majored.
Oh, you double majored. Oh, you did better than me. I want to double major in economics and political science, but it's too difficult for me. So I just did.
See, studying abroad, it was really easy because studying
Yeah.
abroad um took care of a lot of those requirements for that major.
Oh,
So
okay.
like it really helped. That really helped.
Okay. Yeah. So a major in international relations, right? And a
Political
major
science,
in
actually.
political
Yeah.
science. Oh, political science. Okay.
Yeah.
In Canada, yeah, I'd say political science, but there's international relations. They're kind of the same but different.
Same.
I always felt like I was less than the international relations students for some reason. But for me, you guys are studying the same thing as me. I don't know why you guys feel like you're better because you got international relations. All right, so yeah, major political science and major Spanish then, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay, interesting. And for political science, did you focus on anything? In my case, I focused a lot on Latin American politics. In your case, was there a specific area that you like to focus on? I'm just curious for myself. I don't think anybody else would really care, but for me, I'm curious.
So I did my like, this might be boring to a lot of people, but I did like a wide variety of classes. Like, I kind of did like an international relations focus, I guess. But interestingly enough, my thesis was on like voting trends in the Midwest. So
okay, that's
actually something very domestic politics.
Yeah.
Like,
what was that, just because it was easy or because you were interested in it?
I was interested because I wanted to understand like why three states that are so close to each other
Okay, yeah.
vote so differently. And I was
That's
kind of like, why does this state that's, because usually regions kind of vote similarly, but then
Yeah.
I was like, what is the reason? Like, what is the reason behind this? Why does this state that's the neighborhood of this state vote so differently in presidential and local elections? And so that was like my paper.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
Interesting.
if you're ever interested, I can talk about that sometime.
Well,
But
yeah,
no.
I probably would be, but I'm pretty sure most people I don't really care about local American politics that much.
Yeah. Hey, I don't blame you.
Okay. Did you go to any other Latin American countries during? Well, no. So you went to Ecuador, and then after what, like a year later, 2 years later, you went to Sevilla.
Yeah. So I did Ecuador my freshman year, and I loved it so much that then it's interesting because I'll just like do the whole Spanish thing. Then I started working at a restaurant as a server, and everyone that worked in the kitchen was Mexican. So like,
well, you tell me, you tell us. I've been to Chicago, and I don't know if you know Anthony Bourdain, but I watched a lot of his shows and read his books. And I know it seems like in the United States, almost all the cooks, all the servers right now are Mexicans, Ecuadorians, Peruvians. They all seem to be Latinos. So even in the Midwest where you're from, same thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of states for us like that. I mean, you look at, obviously there's just the Hispanic population. So we have a lot of like Cubans in Miami. It's like a bunch of Cubans, a bunch of Puerto Ricans in Orlando and Florida, in New York, Dominicans in Boston. Like that's all, I mean, and then you look at the Southwest. And then there's like New Mexico is a majority Hispanic, like Texas. I mean, these places were part of Mexico for a long time. California, LA, Texas, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. Like, I mean, it's all, and it's not necessarily like, because there's kind of immigrants that are there now. And then there's also people that have been there for generations, right? I mean, There's Mexicans that have been there for 200 years, 300 years.
Yeah.
So yes, and even in the Midwest, like Chicago and in Minneapolis,
Mhm.
where I'm from, which is a big city, like all of our kitchen staff, at least at that time, was from Mexico. So
Mhm.
for sure, we have a huge, huge influence from a lot of Hispanic cultures, but particularly where I'm from, at least from Mexican culture. Huge,
Mhm.
like huge, 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 huge community. And
Okay.
so all the cooking staff was. So that's how I practiced my Spanish a lot of times,
Yeah.
like out of school, and like I became friends with them and we hung out and like, just did stuff. And like I
Yeah.
played in like a soccer league and,
Mhm.
all that sort of stuff. And so that was where I kept on practicing Spanish. And then sophomore year,
Mhm.
because it was really weird because where I went to school, we had 3 terms. We had fall term, then we had January off
Mhm.
where you could take a class, and then we had spring term. And in my January of my freshman year, I went to Ecuador.
Mhm.
January of my sophomore year, I went to Honduras. So
Oh,
that was like
okay.
my second
Mhm.
experience going back to Latin America.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny again because very similar stories. I worked as a busser, bartender, waiter when I was in university too. So anybody watching this, sometimes Latinos think it's kind of weird because I don't think it's a good job for Latinos in Latin America, but a very common job for people in university in Canada, United States is to work as a server, bartender, waiter. And I don't know about you, but usually it's pretty good because you get lots of tips. Did you get lots of tips at the restaurant?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was like speaking, it's the opportunity to implement what you learn in the classroom, like in real life with native speakers. So yeah.
Well, that too. Yeah, obviously tips for Spanish, but also like tips as
Oh,
in
tips. Oh, I'm
propinas.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
lots of tips. Yeah. Lots
yeah,
of
yeah,
tips.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good job for university. So you went to Honduras in your second year. How was your Honduras experience? Was it as good as Ecuador, or was it very different?
Yeah. So this time it wasn't for school. I did this like this was a medical mission that I
Okay.
went on, and I served as a translator. So
Hmm.
one of my good friends, her dad was like a orthodontist. And
Okay.
so he mounted a team. They had done this a few years, and we went down to Honduras and set up a dental clinic
Hmm.
and a dental, and there was a medical. So it was both.
Hmm.
And I went down and I translated we did like 3 weeks I was there for 4 weeks maybe, but we did
Hmm.
3 weeks of, yeah, just a free dental and medical clinic for the community.
Okay.
And also we had like medications that we handed out. So doctors came down. I think there's probably maybe, gosh, there might have been 20 of us maybe.
Hmm.
And I served as a translator. So I would go from like the dental room
Hmm.
back to like the medical room, like back and forth to translate for them. And
Yeah.
that was so awesome. Honduras is also like an incredible country and
Hmm.
super, super diverse as well, because I was near Tegucigalpa, like kind of in the middle. And
Hmm.
then afterwards, we went up to the coast, which there's
Okay.
like 2 islands, Roatan and
Yeah.
Utila. And
Hmm.
I don't know if you know about this, the community Garifuna. Have you ever heard about them
No,
before?
I heard about that. I know about the places you mentioned, but I never heard about that
It's
community.
so cool because in the coast, like along the coast in Garifuna and like Nicaragua and even up through Belize and stuff, there's this community called the Garifunas, which
Okay.
they are not Hispanic. Like they
Okay.
speak Garifuna, which is kind of a indigenous language mixed with
Okay.
African languages. They're
Oh.
descendants of some of the slaves that came over, and they kind of they escaped and created these communities along the coast.
Okay.
And it's so different. Like
Hmm.
it's so different, but it's like this totally different community, totally different language,
Hmm.
really, really awesome food. And
Yeah.
then when I went to we went to Utila, which was the
Okay.
island. It's Caribbean culture, so it's not
Hmm.
even Hispanic. Like a lot of people speak English as a
Okay.
first language, and they have like a Caribbean accent, but it's still technically Honduras.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, Honduras is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Very diverse place. Yeah. So, because you said indigenous. Yeah. So it's kind of like a mixture between indigenous and African. Is that what you're describing with that culture?
Yeah, so the Garifuna, like I'm not like an expert, but as
Yeah.
far as I know, like Garifuna is a language that comes from like Carib, which is it was
Okay.
like the indigenous language in
Yeah.
the Caribbean before the Spanish arrived.
Mhm.
And so what happened was this is the story
Mhm.
that I heard. So there was a slave ship that was coming over, and it got like shipwrecked like over near Barbados, like over near those islands. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? And then
Yeah.
those escaped slaves from the ship, they interacted with the natives, and they
Mhm.
kind of like created like this community.
Mhm.
And so they kind of created this hybrid language, which was
Okay.
the native language with these African languages.
Okay. Yeah.
And
So
then
it's
that
good.
mixed and that created Garifuna language. And
Yeah.
then they went to, and then they were over in the I think the Lesser Antilles, one of those islands. I can't remember which one. And then
Okay.
they migrated and they were pushed over to like Honduras and Belize. And so
Mm-hmm.
nowadays you'll find like a huge community of Garifunas all along
Okay.
the coast.
Yeah.
But it's technically, I'd say, it's like, yeah, it's like a native language. It's like Arawak and Carib. I think it's related to
Okay.
those. It has elements of those two languages mixed with
Okay.
African
Uh-huh.
elements.
Huh. Yeah, well, yeah, I hear a lot of gringos talk about that area, but yeah, it's the first time that somebody's kind of described what's going on in that area. People just go there, oh, nice beaches. Yeah, people are more African, but it's the first time somebody's explained to me about the culture a little bit.
Yeah,
All right, so also it seems like you did a lot of traveling during university,
I
due
did.
to
Yeah.
university, and also volunteering. So Ecuador, Honduras, Sevilla, any other places you went to during university?
And then so that was the first, second, third year. And then the fourth year, we have 4 years of college. And
Yeah.
then so freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, those are great terms to know
Mhm.
for,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
college and high school as well. We use it for high school as well, because there's 4 years
Yeah.
of high school.
Mhm.
But for my senior year, so then junior, I went to Spain for 9 months, and then I came back. And then senior year, I went to Costa Rica, and that was just
Okay.
vacation. But I did a whole month in Costa Rica
Yeah.
with my girlfriend at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, we did a whole month in Costa Rica. So that was also awesome as well. Like Costa Rica
I'm
is
guessing
beautiful.
at the beach. I'm guessing that when most gringos go to Costa Rica, it's normally to go to the beach.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting because I was at college. We were both college students. We went
Yeah.
to San Jose, and then we did some of the stuff in the middle. It's a
Okay.
small country, but we
Yeah.
did like the volcano. It's been so long, I can't remember the name. And then we went over to the Pacific side. Yeah. So we did the Pacific side, and we went down and did like Tamarindo and some of those, all the beaches along the Pacific.
Yeah. All right. And did it rain a lot?
I don't think like it did rain, but I don't
Yeah.
remember it
It
raining
wasn't
like
bad.
too much.
Yeah.
It
I
was definitely
I
hot.
just
It
hear
was like,
Costa
yeah, there
Rica
was like
and Panama, it just
monkeys.
rains a lot. But
Well,
also lots of jungle too, right?
yes, which was, for us, like for we see like a monkey and it's, oh my gosh, a monkey. Like
Yeah. It's incredible when you see a monkey. For me,
yes.
seeing iguana, a monkey. Actually, another interesting fact for you, in my province, Alberta, there's no rats or cockroaches. So actually, even seeing a rat or a cockroach in Latin America, oh wow.
You didn't have
Look at this.
rats?
Yeah, we don't have rats in my province, so there's no rats. Yeah,
How
I think
did
it's like
they?
one of the few places in the world that has no rats. We have a special government agency, whose job is basically to, if a farmer calls and says, I think I have a rat on the property, they go and they trap it and they kill it. So it's just, our province
That's
is rat free.
crazy.
So yeah, if anybody's wanting to know, yes, you want a place with no rats, come to Alberta. It's the place to be. All right, so you graduate from university. Actually,
Mhm.
what did you take a master's degree, get a master's degree, or was that it for university for you?
So I got a master's degree later on.
Okay.
So like right away I graduated, then I did my job, and then I guess just quickly, I guess I did more stuff in Latin America through my job. So I went back and I was in Colombia for a long time, doing stuff out of Bogota, where my work had me for a while.
Yeah.
Which is like the purest form of Spanish. Like I don't say it like that, but it's so clear how they speak so clearly in Bogota.
Okay. Yeah, let's take a pause here because I always find it funny how I think it's limeños, quiteños, and Bogotanos. Well, I don't think they argue. It's just whenever you talk to them, limeños will say, "Oh, we have the purest form of Spanish." Talk to quiteño, they'll be, "Oh, we have the purest form of Spanish." Yeah, you talk to Bogotano, "Oh, we have the purest form of Spanish." But yeah, so it seems like in your case, your personal opinion from what you experienced, yeah, Bogotanos have a very nice, pure form of Spanish.
It's very like usted, and like I mean, you have to remember, at this point my Spanish was very Spain based because I spent 9 months and I was directly matriculated into the university at the University of Sevilla, and like all my friends were Spanish. I lived with a Spanish family, so like my Spanish was very Andalusian Spanish at this point. And so when I went, and they speak really, really fast, like very, very fast. And so when I went to Bogota, I was like, wow, Like this is like, I just thought they spoke really clearly, and it was
Mhm.
so, it was really different and nice. It was like, "Cómo está usted?" You know, just
Yeah.
like,
Oh, do you remember the su merced? Sometimes you use su merced, and that's kind of like a super usted. I learned about it, I think the last time I was in Bogota. Uh, I was watching some Colombian soap operas, and I
huh?
kept on seeing su merced. And I remember hearing it in the streets sometimes and being, what is that? But yeah, they have like a super usted. I think it's becoming less and less popular with the newer generations, but the older generations, they say, su
That's
merced,
interesting because
tiene hambre?
it seems related to like você in Portuguese.
Yeah, something. Yeah, it's interesting, but it's slowly disappearing.
Oh,
I'm
gotcha.
I don't. Maybe it's kind of sad it's disappearing. Even though for me, I kind of it's interesting that Bogotanos have it, but yeah, it's less and less popular. But if you're in
Gotcha.
Bogota, sometimes you'll hear them say "su merced," and yeah, it's interesting. So Bogota, so Colombia for a while. What other countries did you go to during that time?
Yeah. So with work specifically, I went back to Honduras, did a lot of
Mhm.
stuff in Honduras, Panama, Colombia. I'm trying to think like El Salvador, um, Guatemala. Those like those, yeah, that was like mostly work. So mostly like Central America and then Colombia. Again,
Mhm.
those were like kind of the work ones. And then all my other, and then that was kind of work stuff. And then
Mhm.
all of my other Latin America, like Spanish speaking country experience has been just vacations. So
Mhm.
I've been to Chile like several times, Argentina, Peru, and then where else? Mexico, obviously Puerto Rico. I'm trying to think. Those, yeah, Costa Rica I already said,
Mhm.
Honduras, else, yeah, those are okay. That's it. So those are
Yeah.
those are the ones I went to just
Those
on
are the
vacation.
main
That was just
ones.
vacation. The other
Yeah.
ones.
So yeah, when you go on vacation, do you go on vacation to go to the beach or like you went to Chile? Chile's not really famous for the beaches, more for mountains and wine.
Yeah,
So yeah, when you go to vacation, what's your goal? Is it to relax? Is it to discover more about the cultures?
I don't know about you. I love like mixing things because I think I like to do a lot of different things and I
Mhm.
like variety in my vacations.
Yeah.
So I love like an urban area with a city and maybe going to some good restaurants and a couple
Mhm.
bars and stuff like that, exploring that. And then I love like maybe seeing nature at the same time.
Mhm.
Just taking the culture for what it is. Cause you're right, like some countries aren't beach based, or
Yeah.
I always love like getting like tasting, like always, of course, like the food is always awesome. Like in
Mhm.
Chile, I went to Chile 3 times, I think, but Santiago, I went to the north, Atacama,
Mhm.
which is like the desert. And
Yeah.
then the south, I went to, yeah, Patagonia,
Yeah.
Torres del Paine, which is the national park
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. The
south. So I
famous
went
national
down
park in the
there.
south. Yeah.
So I went like and then all over Chile. Like, so
Yeah.
that was kind of my experience in Chile, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. So for you, you're just curious. You're curious about everything. So if something piques your interest, you're gonna go check it out.
Yeah, exactly. What
Yeah.
about you?
No, yeah, same as you. Well, in a way, I'm my own boss. So for the past 7 years, I just kind of do whatever I want.
That's so
So
nice.
I guess I don't, because yeah, whenever I talk to Latinos, I always think, oh, you're going to Colombia, you're on vacation. It's like, no, I'm working. I'm going to Colombia. I'm going to be working. It's just I can kind of work wherever I want. So ah, don't think I'm being lazy or anything like that. I'm going to be there working. But yeah, when I travel to places, I guess in my case, when it comes to Latinos and Latin America, I'm really big into the music and to the dancing. So, for example, last time I was in Bogota, which was like just a few months ago, I was learning champeta, which is the Caribbean dance from Cartagena, Barranquilla, Santa Marta. I lived in Cartagena for 1 year, so I always
Oh, you
wanted to learn
did?
champeta, but
Oh, nice.
it's kind of, I guess it's an African dance, and in some parts of Latin America, they kind of look down on the African things. So there wasn't really any place to learn. So luckily, when I was in Bogota, I found a teacher from the Caribbean coast of Colombia, and so I took like 16 lessons from him, and I learned how to dance champeta. So yeah, for me, a big thing is I love music and dancing. So that's
Hmm.
one reasons why I like Colombia so much is just for that, and also the food. So that's like one reason why I like Mexico is the food is incredible in Mexico. I want to spend more time in Peru, and I think Ecuador also has some underrated food. So yeah, for me, the big thing is food, culture, music, dance. Yeah, I like seeing nature, but I guess I'm Canadian, so it's just like it's a forest. Like I grew up in a forest, so it's like okay,
Yeah,
cool,
no,
it's
I
a
get what you're
forest.
saying. And
So
Canada's so incredibly beautiful.
yeah, exactly. So of course there's beautiful places, not nature places in Latin America, but uh I'm not a city boy, so it's not as eye-opening for me as it would be for other people. Yeah.
So is your like, I know this interview isn't about you, but like we're getting to know each other as well. So is your Spanish experience and all that pretty much like not just Colombia, but is
Well,
that like
actually, I wanted to ask you about that too. So I'll go first. I'll go first, Spencer.
okay, you go
So
first, then I'll know how
yeah,
to
so
respond.
I began learning Spanish from Mexicans. So in the beginning, I spoke mostly Mexican Spanish.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're beginner, you're gonna have an accent. You're gonna have that beginner, whatever it is in any language you do, it's gonna be awkward. You're gonna be like a baby deer walking in the snow for the first time. But if there was gonna be a hint of some sort of accent, it was gonna be Mexican. Also, vocabulary is gonna be more Mexican. So it's from Mexicans, and then when I started taking Spanish seriously and doing language exchanges online, I wanted to keep on learning from Mexicans, but I found Mexicans a little bit shyer. They're shyer compared to other Latinos.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, and I think and who knows, maybe you don't agree, maybe others don't agree, but I would say Mexicans are maybe some of the most Catholic Latinos. So I kind of feel like they take their religion a little bit more seriously, and that also makes them a little bit shyer compared to other Latinos. Of course, most Latinos are Catholic, but yeah, you go to Colombia or you have lots of experience in Brazil, I want to talk to you about as well. I think like they're Catholic, but like they go to the church, but then afterwards they kind of forget about everything that they learn in church. So I tried to speak to Mexicans, but I couldn't really find any Mexicans to talk to, and they seemed very shy. It was very awkward, the conversations. And then I started meeting Venezuelans and Colombians on these language exchanges, and they were just completely different, just tons of energy. They wanted to talk to you easy, like, hey, are you busy right now? No, I'm not busy right now. Let's talk. So you just talk to them. It's just super easy to talk to them. And yeah, of course, I talked about my channel a lot. The women are very beautiful in Colombia and Venezuela. So that was also another bonus, just having these cute girls like, hey, do you want to talk? And it's like, of course I would love to talk. Let's do some talking. So that shifted my Spanish more towards Colombia. And I think ever since then, yeah, my Spanish has been more Colombian. Sometimes people will say that I speak like a costeño from Colombia, even though I don't think maybe it's true because I spent 1 year in Cartagena, but I think it's also, and you know a lot about this because you're a smart guy and you studied Spanish in university. With Americans, Canadians, just the English language, we like to drop sounds. It's very normal for us to use the schwa, for example.
Right.
So I didn't really focus on Spanish pronunciation, good Spanish pronunciation in the beginning. So I just think my American or Canadian accent infiltrated my Spanish, and Caribbeans, they also like to drop sounds. So I think people just kind of hear me doing Canadian American stuff and they think it's Caribbean, when in reality it's just my first language interfering with my Spanish. But yeah, I would say when on social media, most people will say you kind of sound Colombian. And if they're Colombian, like, oh, you kind of sound like you're from the coast of Colombia. And I was like, yeah, maybe.
I mean, if you spend a year there, that makes sense. Like that's a long time.
Yeah. I never really, because people always ask me that too. Like, were you ever able to understand costeños? Because they're famous for having, yeah, it's funny. Bogota has the purest Spanish, and costeños have maybe one of the, I don't know what the word to use, one of the fastest spoken Spanishes, one of the strangest Spanish dialects in the world. And no, after 1 year living in Cartagena, I still couldn't understand most of what the costeños were saying. But there were a lot of interesting words and slang words and idioms I picked up from the costeños I liked, like no joda, or no. I forgot I'm forgetting my costeño Spanish, or gallo. Oh, Colombians, if you're watching this, remind me, like no mamas gallo, something like that. Like don't pull my hair. They have a special way of saying like pulling your leg, pulling your hair, something like that. But yeah, so most of my Spanish is Colombian now, but I spent lots of time in Argentina, Mexico, and Colombia. So sometimes I get things mixed up, and it can be very confusing. I don't know if it's the same for you when you're traveling. Like you go to a country, you assimilate a little bit to the culture, and then you go to another country and you're
Yeah.
still using the Spanish, and then people will look at you weird, like why did you say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, for example, in Mexico they use currículo to say resume, and in Colombia they use hoja de vida. So I was talking to a Mexican recently, and he told me, well, why do you say hoja de vida on your website? It should be currículo. And I was thinking, oh, really? I was like, I swear that someplace in Latin America says hoja de vida. And I was in Colombia at the time. So the next day I went walking and I saw a sign on a store that said, no, looking for employee, bring your hoja de vida. I was like, oh, Colombians. Okay, I learned this from Colombians. I knew I learned it from somewhere.
I know it's somewhere.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if it's the same for you with your Spanish. You're Spanish because you went to Spain, Andalusia. And then I think you switched more to a Latin American Spanish. Is that the case, or is your Spanish still very Andalusian?
Oh, I think like you made a good point. Like language is always evolving, and everyone's language journey is, and everyone can relate to this. Like you have like a really high level, and then you stop using it, and then like you kind of lose it, and then you regain it again in a different way. Like it's just constantly a journey with it,
Mm-hmm.
And I speak a lot of Portuguese, like a lot of Portuguese, and
Yeah.
they're similar. They're
Mm-hmm.
very different, but they're similar in the fact that like I actually, a lot of Spanish people say that now I speak Spanish with a Portuguese accent.
Yeah.
Which a lot of my Spanish followers say, like, are you American? Are you Brazilian?
Yeah.
Because like I speak so much Portuguese like all the time
Mm-hmm.
that it influences my Spanish. So my goal in 2023, because it's so interesting, my Spanish, just like go back when I was in Spain, like, I mean, I was speaking Spanish all the time and everything all throughout. And then even afterwards with like work and stuff, I didn't speak Portuguese. I just spoke Spanish. And then when I moved to Brazil, I started speaking more Portuguese all the time, less Spanish, obviously. And it just kind of like it affected my Spanish. But I think that's cool because I think a lot of people can probably identify with that journey of languages, how it comes and goes. So I would say, to answer your question, this is kind of a roundabout way to answer your question, but the base of my Spanish is definitely Spain Spanish, like because that's where I spent nearly a year. That's where my Spanish came from. That's, if I see like corazón, I'm gonna say corazón. Like it's just natural for me.
Yeah.
But as I'm like gonna start getting back again, because I want to get some on more apps and stuff and be able to travel again. I think I'll probably like start with like a variety of different Spanishes again and kind of like to polish it back up again. But I'd say the base, to answer your question, is definitely Spain Spanish, I'd say.
Okay. Well, because think in Spain, do they use, because in Latin America, most Latin America, well, it depends. There's vos and there's tú. So it depends on which part of Latin America.
Yeah.
Spain, is it vosotros? What do they use for?
Yeah, they do not use vos. There's no vos sos. Like I remember the first time I heard that was in Honduras. Yeah. When I was in Honduras,
they also use vos. Yeah.
He said like vos sos this, and I was like, what is that? And then I finally learned about that. Like Spain is no vos, it's vosotros and tú. Like they don't really use usted that much, at least in Andalusia. So it's like tú eres, and then like tú eres, tú eres, tú eres.
Okay.
And then like vosotros, like vosotros sois, like they use both vosotros and tú.
Yeah,
for you all, right?
Vosotros in Spain, is that like ustedes or is that like usted?
Ustedes.
Okay, ustedes. Okay, all right.
So they'll use ustedes in like very formal situations, but vosotros is like y'all. Like, hey, what's up, y'all? Like,
okay.
¿Cómo estáis? ¿Cómo estáis? Like that.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll read literature like from Spain because lots of good literature from Spain, but it's always a bit strange to see that vosotros. And I always think in my head how to pronounce that because I don't really listen to any Spanish from Spain, so I always think to myself, how am I supposed to pronounce this? It seems kind of strange.
Yeah.
Now I want to talk to you about Brazil because it seems like it's a big part of your identity now. And I'm learning Portuguese right now, and I hope to be in Brazil for the first time in the next few months. So I'm just curious to know more about the country, your experiences. Yeah. So it seems like your base was Spanish. What made you all of a sudden, learn Portuguese? And it seems like maybe Brazil is your favorite country now in Latin America. What made you make this big shift to Brazil and Portuguese?
Yeah, so I was like Spanish, like since like 13, 14 years old, like
Mhm.
Spanish, that was my thing. Like college, you guys heard my story, Spain, all that, even after post college, for a few years working. So that was it. And then I've always loved learning languages, like
Mhm.
always. I actually went to Africa for work once and I learned French for that. And I spoke German because I lived in Germany when I was a kid. So I've always loved learning languages. And so in my spare time, that's kind of what I do is I like
Mhm.
learn languages and buy language books and learn them. So
Yeah.
Portuguese, I was like, I'd like to learn Portuguese just randomly
Mhm.
because there were some Brazilians that were my neighbors, and I was like, I want to learn. That sounds so cool.
Mhm.
And so I started studying, self-studying, and then I took a test to like get qualified in Portuguese, and I did okay on it. And then my work saw that test, and they were like, "Hey, there's this exchange program in Brazil, and you're one of the few people that have like Portuguese on your resume. Would you like to go to Brazil for this job?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't really speak Portuguese. Like I just can read it
Yeah. Yeah.
and I can kind of understand it, but I can't speak it like at
Mhm.
all. And they were like, "Don't worry about that. Like we'll give you the classes you need to polish it up and really
Mhm.
bring it up to the next level. But are you interested?" I'm like, "Yeah." So then essentially what I did was I self-studied a lot and then I started taking a class online,
Mhm.
maybe 6 months before I went to Brazil,
Okay.
a couple days a week. And then I went to Brazil for a month before 6 months before I moved to Brazil
Okay.
in the northeast called Recife, actually it was
Okay. Yeah.
Olinda.
Yeah.
And I learned at like one of those language schools for gringos. I learned
Mhm.
I just did Portuguese. And so
Yeah.
then my Portuguese was like really, but it was very like a Portuguese with a lot of Spanish because it's very hard for us
Yeah.
as you can to distinguish between those two. That is a challenge in and of itself. But then I started
But we
speaking
say
to
more like mixing
Portuguese,
vocabulary or the pronunciation or both.
both,
Both. Yeah.
both,
Mhm.
both because I mean, we can have a whole nother, we could have like classes and sessions about this. I won't get into it, but there's so many false cognates. There's
Yeah.
pronunciation, like one S in Portuguese is a Z sound, right? So it's
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
casa, but it's casa.
Mhm.
And I speak Portuguese for 3 years, I only spoke Portuguese like every day, all day. And
Yeah.
now I even speak so much Portuguese all the time with all my
Yeah.
friends that like to switch to Spanish, like I have to like shut my eyes and then I'm like Spanish mode. And then I go into
Yeah.
Spanish. And then that's how I have to make that transition because I have to literally switch in my brain because they're so close in so many ways that
Mhm.
it gets you end up speaking Portuñol.
Yeah.
That's what Brazilians
Yeah.
call it at
Uh-huh.
least. So then yeah, then I did that month in Brazil, then I came back to the States and then I moved to São Paulo.
Okay.
And I lived in Brazil for over 3 years. Yeah.
All right. And that was for work, right?
That was for work. Yeah. So I was a
Okay.
professor
Mhm.
and I taught English among other and other topics as well. But I taught English at a university in São Paulo, in the
Okay.
state of São Paulo.
Yeah. And well, 3 years is a long time. That's a long time to be in Brazil. And well, maybe I'll start with this question then, because you have experience both in Spanish speaking Latin America and in Brazil. So, and I haven't been there yet. And sometimes there's gringos that have been to both, just like you, and they try to explain the differences because Brazil is definitely Latin America. It feels very Latino, but I've heard some people say Brazil is like this another planet, like they're Latino, but it kind of feels like another planet, like an extreme Latino planet, whereas the other Latin American countries, they're different, of course, between each other, but there's lots of similarities between them. Where
Yeah.
Brazil is kind of its own thing. Uh, from your own perspective, what are the major differences maybe between Brazilians and the other Latin American cultures, or the main things that kind of separate them from the rest?
Well, I think like Brazil's first of all a huge country. It has 210 million people. I mean,
Yeah.
what a Colombia have 60 million. Like, look how much bigger Brazil is.
Hmm.
Mexico, I think the second biggest country in Latin America has 120 million. So it's
Yeah.
huge country. And
Hmm.
geographically, it's enormous. I mean, it's
Hmm.
huge. So within Brazil itself, you have so many, each state and each region is so different from the next.
Hmm.
I would say in the same way that the States is or Canada or even, Mexico, these bigger countries that have that sort of geographical diversity. So it is so different and each one has its own history with its own demographics, racially,
Hmm.
religiously, like it's so unique each region. So you
Mhm.
can't, not you, but like one couldn't like summarize Brazil.
Yeah.
Like this is all Brazilians, because Brazilians are so diverse. Like I think that's the biggest thing I would say is like
Mhm.
I know a lot of countries are diverse, but Brazil is so diverse. Like
Mhm.
looking at people, I mean, they have the highest population of Japanese outside of Japan. They have the highest
Yeah.
population of Lebanese outside of Lebanon.
Mhm.
They have so many, a huge, obviously they had a lot of slaves from Africa. So they have a huge, like, like African influence in their culture, especially in the Northeast, but everywhere
Yeah.
over the country. They have huge immigrants from Germany, like not just a little, a lot.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, anyone could be Brazilian, and people, that's the thing that like a lot of gringos don't realize is like, they're like, oh, you look Brazilian. Like, you can't look
Yeah. Yeah.
Brazilian. Brazilians
I've
are like
yeah.
Canadians,
Mhm.
and I would say like Americans, and even more so, they're more diverse than any other Latin country for
Okay.
sure, in
Yeah.
my experience. Like,
Yeah.
I could be Brazilian, anyone could be Brazilian.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I've heard that because obviously for me Colombia is very diverse. It's a small country, but of course it's impressive how diverse it is within that country. But at
right,
the same time, me as a Canadian, I go to Colombia and it's obvious that I'm Canadian. Like they
right,
just know automatically, well, not Canadians, they know I'm gringo. They know probably United States,
right,
Australia, Canada, something like
right,
that.
right.
But I've heard, and maybe you can confirm this or not, that other gringos, they go to Brazil and like you said, it's so diverse that I could be Brazilian because there are parts where there are people who might look like me. Yeah, because I think in the south of Brazil, it's very German. So there are people that look like you, that look like me. And so if you're walking around a big, oh, that's a big word in English, the giant city, giant city of Sao Paulo, that people might not even take a second look because, oh, he's probably just some guy from Porto Alegre or Curitiba, something like that.
Dude, you look Brazilian. Like, you
Yeah.
could be Brazilian. I'm 6'2", look
Mhm.
blonde, huge. I could be Brazil. Like, and it's not, and this is my experience at least, is like a lot of these countries, like they might have a few blonde people, but they know I've been there. They know that we're a gringo. They're like,
Yeah.
there's a gringo. And it might be because of how we dress as well and how we
Yeah,
act.
for
But
sure.
when you're 6'2" and 225 pounds and have blonde hair, like the probability of you being Colombian's pretty low. Like there might be a
Mhm,
few, but in Brazil,
mhm,
you there, like I cannot emphasize, and this was the biggest shocker for me because I had so much experience in these Spanish speaking countries. Like,
mhm,
you will not stand out in a physical way. Like, you will
mhm.
stand out how you dress maybe and when you talk, but besides that, not necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's so diverse, it's so different than the Spanish speaking countries, and that was another thing that shocked me. I had no experience in Brazil, and I
Mhm.
was expecting more, like more similarities with like
Okay.
other, like the
Yeah.
Hispanic,
Mhm.
with Hispanic speakers.
Yeah.
So different, like the food, because
Mhm.
when you have 210 million people, you have your own culture that can feed itself. Like, you're not depending on
Yeah.
like pop culture, media,
Mhm,
music. Like, it's all within Brazil. Like, they
mhm.
run the Lusophone world. So Portugal,
Yeah.
Angola, Mozambique, like they have, there is a whole world that you're going to get to know, that's a Portuguese speaking world, that's huge, and it's very
Mhm,
distinct from a Spanish speaking world. And what
mhm,
people, I don't think a lot of gringos know, is how different Brazil is, and
mhm.
how, like, it's so funny because Brazilians, it depends on what, this really depends on what Brazilian you're talking to, but a lot of times, like, they see Hispanics as like Latinos, like how we see them. Like, they don't see themselves necessarily even as the same as them.
Okay. Yeah. Mhm,
They see themselves as different. They're like, oh
mhm,
yeah, the Spanish speakers, and then
mhm.
there's them. That's how distinct it is in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So, like, I remember I went to a grocery store for the first time when I was in Brazil, and I
Mhm.
was like, where's the salsa? Like, where's the spicy food? Where's
Yeah.
no,
No. Yeah. They
it's
got their
so
own
different.
stuff.
It's so
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
It's so cool though. Like, you are going to absolutely love it. Brazil is amazing,
Mhm,
and it's going to be a cool learning experience. And also, like, people's like, oh, you can just speak Spanish. Like, I guess you could, but I've never even seen that. Like, people, you always just, like, you have to speak Portuguese. Like, it's different enough where you can't just get by with Spanish for sure, I don't think.
yeah. Well, I don't think I wouldn't want to anyways. And
Yeah.
I, I don't. I don't think learning Portuguese is. too difficult. I've been doing a lot of studying lately, reading a lot in Portuguese, and yeah, I think the hardest thing is, like you said, it's a very diverse country. So actually, maybe you've seen this before. You like learning languages, so
I do, yeah.
I got the Assamil book for Brazilian
Oh,
Portuguese. Yeah.
nice.
And
Nice.
I've gotten to the part where they start introducing the different dialects of Brazil.
Yeah.
And so I just saw the Minas Gerais dialect, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just heard the Nordeste dialect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I listened to it and I said, "Oh my goodness, it's completely different." Yeah,
Oh, it's so
but like,
true.
I'm learning like neutral Brazilian Portuguese right now, but then I heard the Minas Gerais and I heard the Nordeste, and this is going to be a long journey trying to learn this Portuguese, because yeah, they sounded completely different from
Yeah.
each other, and then from that neutral Brazilian Portuguese. Just a quick question, maybe you can help me out. It seems like there's also a dialect in Brazil where the S is like a sh, like Minas Gerais. They say
Yeah.
sh. I don't know which dialect it is, but I've heard a few Brazilians talk with S's, like SHs.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's like Portuguese from Portugal, they do that. But it's a different type. So that S is really mostly known with Rio de Janeiro, where they say like Minas. But there's a couple other cities and areas. So Rio, it's called Carioca, which is like the people from Rio. That one up in like the northeast, some of the areas it's called chiar in Portuguese, like to chiar. That's when you do that sound.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In the northeast, they do it in some cities. In the north, like Pará and Manaus, and then even in the south, in Floripa, in Florianopolis, which is in Santa Catarina, they also shia a little bit. So it's actually interesting. Any city that has a lot of influence from the Portuguese, that's where they a lot of times will shia. So a lot of those cities on the coast throughout the entire country, you'll hear them doing that. But it's very Carioca, very Rio de Janeiro. Yeah.
Okay, well, now I know. Okay, now I can confirm. I thought it was crazy because I listened to one audio and they wouldn't be doing it, and then I listened to another one and they would be doing it.
Yeah.
And I was asked myself, well, which one is correct? What am I supposed to be saying? But yeah, I think it's going to depend on which dialect you want to learn.
Exactly.
So if you want to learn Carioca or Paulista or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yep.
And yet, so you lived in Brazil for 3 years. Do you have and it's very diverse, and it seems like, you just have a lot of passion for all things Brazil, but is there one part of Brazil that you enjoy more than the other? Or is it one of those things where, okay, when it comes to beaches, of course, I want to go to the Northeast. When it comes to food, I prefer the South. When it comes to lifestyle, I prefer Sao Paulo. What are your favorite parts of Brazil?
Yeah, I think so I lived in Sao Paulo, and I didn't live in the capital. I did a little bit, but I mostly lived in the interior. Then like COVID hit, and that like changed a bunch of things. But yeah, I mostly lived in the interior. So that's like where my heart probably is, in the interior, just Sao Paulo. But all of Brazil is awesome, and each region offers something special and different than the other. The food is all incredible from all the different places. Like, we can talk after this interview and I can give you so many different tips. Like, I can just talk your ear off for sure. But to answer your question, like, I don't think so. I don't think there's one over the other. I think I've been to all the different regions, and every region has something awesome.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, yeah, I think we could talk a lot more about this, but
yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to take too much.
No. I mean, I'm good. If you just hear my dog, if you hear, it's actually my family's dog in the background. That's him. So
scampering around.
Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you about this. So you learned Portuguese, and some other Latinos want to learn Portuguese. Actually, there's one Brazilian teacher who focuses just on teaching Latinos Portuguese. For me, that's very interesting that like he doesn't care about teaching Portuguese to gringos. He's focused just on Latinos. Yeah, and it does seem like he has lots of students. So it does seem like there's lots of other Latinos that want to learn Portuguese. So I'm just wondering, in your own words, from your own experience learning Portuguese, what are some of the hardest aspects of learning the language? I heard somebody a few days ago say the nasal sounds are really hard to master. Like, for me, it seems like I'm doing it right, but you actually lived in the country. So maybe when you first got there, the Brazilians said, no, you're not doing it right. You got to more nasally, use that nose more. What are some of the biggest challenges to learning the Portuguese language?
So yeah, I'll get kind of like nerdy here and grammary for all the language people. But
Uh,
yeah, I did learn Portuguese as somebody that spoke Spanish fluently before. So these are the biggest things I'd say, like obviously vowel sounds. So Portuguese has more vowel sounds than Spanish and
yeah, for
English.
sure.
So they have more than Spanish for sure. So for example, you have like avô e avó.
Oh yeah, I think because they have I read this in the book, yeah, and I was trying to understand. I think I kind of understand it, but was it called in Portuguese? Is it short vowel, long vowel? Like they have long
Open and
version,
closed.
open and closed. Yeah, open and
Yeah,
closed.
so
Yeah.
they have open and closed. So you have like open, you have like you have avô, which is grandpa, and then you have avó, which is grandma. So it's an open. You
Oh yeah, I saw that. I was wondering. I saw that like a few days ago. I was like, what is the? See, it looks like the same word. Okay, but okay,
like
so
he and
it's
she, for example,
mhm,
like he is ele,
mhm,
ele, and
mhm,
she is ela, but it's
mhm.
still with an e. So
Oh, but
it's
so
el, but it opens up with, so you say ele está aqui. He's here.
mhm,
Ele.
mhm.
Ela está aqui. She's here. So then it opens, that E opens with Ella. So that's an open E versus a closed E.
Oh,
But
okay,
those
okay.
vowels obviously are scattered throughout so many words, everything. So, and a
Mhm.
lot of times you don't know if it's open or closed.
So it's just more like
Um,
just training your ear and
you
then
will hear it.
practicing
Yeah,
it.
you'll hear and train it. And so I think that's the vowels, I think, is for sure. And then obviously all the nasal vowels. So like coração, coração,
Yeah.
like coração,
But for you,
pão.
was it easy or were there some things they had to like learning the R in Spanish, right? It took me quite a few years to even get close to it.
Yeah.
Were you able to master it quickly? Like the most difficult thing was to practice it, or were there quite a few things that you had to tune up in order to get somewhat close to the proper nasal sound?
I mean, I think as you know, language learning is we're always learning, even
Mhm.
after however many years speaking Spanish and having speaking Portuguese, and I'm sure people that are learning English, some of your followers, like you're always learning new things. And so, in my opinion, I feel like I'm always still trying to fine tune it more and more and
Yeah,
more. But
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I definitely didn't get it right away. Like, no, I mean, it definitely came with time and hearing and
Mhm.
saying and hearing. And after you say it 5,000 times, like
Yeah.
it finally
You
starts to get
finally
a
get
little
it.
bit better.
Yeah, yeah.
But it definitely is something that comes with practice for sure.
All right. Well, people ask me this question sometimes, uh, and I don't never have a good answer. I learned Swedish, so I do have an answer for Swedish, but for Spanish, no. And I'm learning Portuguese and Russian now, so I'm not too sure. But for example, favorite words in other language, like for example, in Sweden they have lagom, which just means for Swedish culture just means just right, and which is perfect for Swedish people because they're not too high, they're not too low, they're just right. So it's just a beautiful word for Swedish people. I'm wondering in Spanish or in Portuguese, do you have a favorite word that I don't know really describes the culture or that really just stuck to you for whatever reason?
Yeah, so there's a couple words like in Spanish that I love. Like I love the word ojalá. Like I don't
Oh
know
yeah,
why.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's so
yeah,
random, but I just love that word. Like ojalá. Like I don't know.
yeah.
I think that's so
Especially when they say
cool.
it, right? This one, like in
Yes.
conversation, like ojalá, ojalá, yeah, just
Yeah, it's
ojalá.
just such a pretty word, and I
Yeah.
don't know. I just think it's so cool. I love that word in
Yeah.
Spanish.
Well, it's not even actually Spanish. It's from, I think you probably already know, it's from the Moorish conquerors of the Spanish Peninsula. So
Right.
yeah, just the like an Arabic word that they now use in the Spanish. And yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting word, especially with the the ojalá, ojalá.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that
Mhm.
word. What about you? Do you have like a favorite one?
No, what? I don't really have one. Maybe I'm still searching for it. Uh, I'm trying to think of this one that I really like. Oh, actually, kind of silly, but this is from the Costa de Colombia. Porque ajá, which means like porque sí. And for me, just really describes, especially the Caribbeans. The Caribbeans have the attitude of just, I do things because I want to do things. I didn't think before doing it. I just did it. So in the Costa de Colombia, they say, porque lo hiciste? Porque, just because. So this is like just because. And yeah, because in most Latin America, they're going to say porque sí, but they say porque, so just it's very costeño, it's very Caribbean.
That's
And
awesome.
for me, it just kind of encapsulates their culture. It's just, why do we do things? Just because. Yeah, just, yeah, porque, just that's. So for me, that's probably one of my favorites. I love to say it. I think that's why people think I'm from Colombia or from the Costa is because I like to use porque, all the time. And also for learning languages too, because I don't know if you've ever experienced this teaching English, but sometimes people ask you like, why do gringos say that? Like, why do they use that? For example, I taught on Instagram, piel de gallina in English, which is goosebumps. And somebody asked, why do they use, was it gusano? Gasano? I can't remember how to say goose in Spanish, but yeah. No, ganso. Why do they use ganso? Piel de ganso. And well, I asked him like, why do you guys use gallina? Which is also a good question. But another thing that I like to tell my students is, porque, I don't know why we use it. Is it porque? We do what we do. We do.
Yeah,
what we
exactly.
Do. I don't know how to explain everything in a language. It's difficult. Yeah. Now, I could talk to you for a long time, but unfortunately, I got another thing I have to do pretty soon. So I want to try to wrap things up. I make a lot of videos for Latinas that date gringos, and Latinas, I think Brazilians, Colombians, Mexicans, they're very frustrated with us because we're very different culturally. I'm wondering if you have any advice or any just quick maybe culture shocks that you have dating Latinas in the past, where maybe some things that you've noticed dating them that were hard for you to deal with, or maybe advice that you want to give a Latina who is going out with the gringo right now or thinking about going out with the gringo in the future.
I think just remember cultures are cultures, and sometimes what you think, I mean, everyone has different approaches to different things, and remember that maybe what you like, if you interpret that somebody's interested in you, maybe in a different culture it's not like that. I guess that's the biggest, broadest statement that I could say is sometimes maybe people are less emotional, and that doesn't mean they're less interested, or who knows, I think that in general, maybe we're not as an emotional culture, maybe more not as touchy-feely and stuff like that. So maybe since we're not like that, maybe people think, oh, this person isn't interested, or I don't know. So maybe that would be I guess the biggest thing.
Maybe I can ask you this then, because would you say to a Latina, because for me, maybe you adapted better than I did. There's still definitely culture shocks for me, and definitely the touchy-feely and being really Latinas really want to be close to their partner. And I guess as a Canadian that grew up on a farm in Canada in the cold, I prefer to have space. Are you very similar in that you prefer to have a little bit of space from your partner, or do you really prefer that Latino being close all the time? And I guess depending on your answer, would you tell a Latina, just try to give a little bit more space to your gringo partner because they probably prefer that?
I think that's just between the two people. I think whatever works for them, because I think there's probably people that fall outside of those cultural norms probably as well. Oh, I'm not touchy-feely at all or something, and I'm Latina. So maybe there are people like that. For me, I think if I'm comfortable with somebody, I mean, I do like that about Latino culture, give a hug or you give a kiss on the cheek, and I like that touchy-feeliness stuff during COVID. I mean, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
But I love the warmth of Latino culture, I think, and you probably do too. That's why we both fell in love with it. It's just so incredible. And I think how that translates into romantic relationships as well. I think, if that works for that couple, then hey, that works.
Yeah. I think I talked to somebody else about that, and they gave a similar answer to you. We're very, very broad. Just said, they're from a different culture. Just try to be understanding. Try to understand where they're coming from, and of course, if you like the person, you didn't say this, but I think you'd agree. You're going to probably have to make some compromises. So if you're extremely Latino, touchy-feely, and you like or love somebody who is gringo and a little bit more reserved, you probably have to make some sacrifices and understand where they're coming from. You can't expect them to completely change because that's very difficult. I'm Canadian, and I don't really like living in Canada that much, but I can't completely get rid of my Canadian side. It's here to stay. I like quiet. Of course, I love Latin American dances and music, but I like quiet, and no Latino is ever going to convince me that being surrounded by noise 24/7 is an ideal situation. It's just, that's who I am. I can't change that I'm Canadian.
Makes sense. You're from the middle. You're from the middle of Canada,
Yeah.
so that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it's like going from Bogota, then going back to the farm right now where it's completely silent. Yeah, it's completely two different worlds for sure.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, again, I could talk to you for a lot longer, but I got to finish it up now. So maybe just some quick hitters.
Sure.
I want to know, what's your favorite food from Latin America? Or if it's difficult, maybe a few of your favorite foods from Latin America.
I love Mexican food. I love Mexican food. Oh, so good.
I agree. Yeah.
I just love Mexican food. Like, I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. I also like ceviche from Peru and like Chile is really, really good.
Mhm.
I love that. I'd say like those are like probably my
Yeah,
that
but
just stand out
specific-
right when you just asked me.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a specific dish from Mexico that you like? In my case, it's pollo con mole. I love mole. Mole is just an incredible sauce that they make. Is there one that you love more than the other?
I mean, I love like all of it, to be honest. Like
Yeah,
I do. I love it all.
difficult
You know, I
choice.
just was with my friend from the southeast from Oaxaca, and I had like some of those. He has ants, like some ants.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
It was really good, actually. It was so good. So even like that, even like different stuff I like.
Yeah, I tried grasshoppers for the first time with guacamole, like last year, and I was surprised. It was pretty good.
Oh, you're right.
Mexicans,
It was
Mexicans can
grasshoppers.
okay, yeah. Mexicans can make anything taste good.
It was so good. They like
These
put on some
grasshoppers are good.
lime and like
Yeah.
chili, and it was like, yeah, so good, so good, so good.
All right. I love Colombia. Colombia's one of my favorite countries, and they got lots of good juices. But also Mexico has lots of good waters. And you've been to Brazil. I think Brazil has lots of good juices. Do you have a favorite drink, whether it's a cocktail, juice, or water from Latin America?
I think probably coffee. I love like
Oh, really?
Colombian coffee. I
Yeah.
mean, I love Brazilian coffee. I love Colombian coffee. I love like strong coffee. Honduras had coffee as well, where I was at. So I do. I love coffee. I love all the fresh juices that you can get from any of these countries. You know, because they have so many. You know,
Yeah.
we don't have the variety of juices and fruits that they have. So
Yeah.
like
That's what I
so
tell-
good, fresh juices, man.
Yeah, that's what I tell the Latinos. And when I was growing up, it was only orange juice and apple juice. That's all you could really choose.
Right.
And
And you have to get it from the grocery store.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So and maybe it's a bit different now, but when I was a kid, orange juice, apple juice, that was all you could get. Your only options. And maybe the last question, last quick hitter. If you could choose one city in Latin America to spend, I don't know, the rest of your life in, maybe you wouldn't, but
gosh.
if you had to choose one, what city would you choose?
Oh, I'm gonna have to say like several because
Mhm.
obviously, like I think there's a lot of cities in Brazil that I really like Sao Paulo. I like Buenos Aires. I like Santiago. I can't choose one. I like Bogota. I like Mexico City was really awesome. I think San Jose, Costa Rica. I mean, so many. I mean, I know I'm like saying all of them, but like Lima was cool.
Yeah.
Quito was cool. I mean,
Yeah, you
there's a
can't,
lot
you
of
can't choose
different
one,
things.
just one.
I can't.
Oh,
I can't. I'm sorry. I can't.
What's that word? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Being so politically correct. Just trying
Maybe,
trying to
maybe
play the middle.
But I truly
But
do like because every time I go somewhere new, like and that's I have a lot of those videos that talk about the slang. I really get into like what is happening.
Yeah, I noticed that. Like
in that
I love the
place
slang too,
and
but
in
like
that
you really
city.
seem to
I
learn the
love that because
slang.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love living in the moment. I love getting to know the place, and that's why like we always have our history of stuff, but I love like learning new stuff and falling kind of in love. As cheesy as that
Yeah,
sounds, with
yeah,
like a new.
yeah.
So I love that. I love that. I love.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's like a feeling. It's like falling in love with a woman, like learning about new cultures. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
love you. You're so unique. You're so beautiful. Yeah. Actually, I have to. Well, I'll send you a WhatsApp. I bought a dictionary of Colombianismos. It's a really good dictionary, so I think you'd enjoy it. So,
Oh yeah,
it's really
send
difficult
it.
to get. So I think you have to go to Colombia to get it, but maybe you can get it in the United States. I'm not too sure, but I think you would really enjoy it.
I would love that. Yes.
It's an incredible dictionary. Yeah, I'll send you the book so you can check it out. All right, actually, I would love to talk to you more about like starting TikTok, more about Brazil, future plans, stuff like that. But unfortunately, I have to go, Spencer. So hopefully, if my students or your students want us to talk again, well, leave comments down below and let us know. And hopefully, Spencer will be kind enough to give us more time. Yeah, Spencer, any last things you want to tell the people who are listening?
No, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk. It's been great, and we have to talk more to try to
Yeah.
keep on
Well, actually,
connecting.
I also wanted to ask you for like advice learning languages, but again, we don't have time. So yeah, maybe we can do another
Maybe
interview where
round two.
yeah, round two, talk more about learning languages, more about TikTok, all that stuff. And of course, if you're learning English and you want to check out Spencer's Instagram or TikTok. So your TikTok, what's your I forgot the word.
They're both
Username? What?
Spencer Conoce.
Spencer Conoce. So yeah, Conoce the verb, right? Conoce.
Yep.
All right,
Conoce.
so good. So if you guys want to check out Spencer, he's on TikTok, he's on Instagram. Are you anywhere else or just those two?
Those are just the two that I'm on right now.
Smart. For me, it's a big hassle trying to be on all social media. So yeah, Spencer, yeah, stick to those two for now. All right, Spencer. So thank you very much. Have a Merry Christmas because we're recording this on December 22nd.
You
And
too.
yeah, hopefully we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Bye, Spencer.
All right. Bye.